April Surgent is a woman with an adventurous, gutsy spirit and is a record keeper of our time. Her art form informs the viewer and gives the viewer a glimpse into the fragility of our ecosystems in a material that holds light, refracts light, and reflects light. As urbanization distances us from environments we depend on, April's cameo glass engravings call us to attention. They give us a moment to stop, look, see, listen, think, smell, learn, breathe. In this conversation, we look at her career through life changing experiences. She talks about her residency at Pilchuck Glass School. She is going to share her ongoing collaboration with the NOAA Hawaiian monk seal research program, where she was confronted with marine debris and the immediate effects of climate change, to in a very important commission with Iowa State University. April approaches art making, as this comment on the status quo and a mirror reflecting our world. Now, her contemporary approach to this ancient art form of cameo glass engraving expand the medium's boundaries, both in scale and in subject. She's going to take us on this inward reflective process with her mark making, which starts with pinhole photography. So she could really capture that interplay between light and shadow. She's going to talk about her drawing style and her writing. And then finally, going in on this composition on the sheets of glass. We go further into the art making and the public response to her title In Our Absence. Some might say that her work is haunting. It's definitely mysterious and moody, and I think there's something undeniably truthful here. She's going to talk about her future projects, which includes following her intuition and following her heart, which is undoubtedly going to be in a reflection of our planet and following the light. But I want to leave you here as we dive into the episode with one of my favorite quotes by April Surgent. She says that artists have a unique opportunity to challenge the viewer. Hello, sister, April
Hello.
Surgent. It is so good to see you.
You too. It's been a minute.
It has, and I'm recently moved to Hoodsport, Washington. I'm splitting my time between Washington and Hawaii. But to look at your smiling face and to look at all of those giant trees behind you, you are in a tree sanctuary.
Yeah, I am. We call this our tree house. My husband and I are just moving into this house we've been working on diligently for 3.5 years. It's been a crazy adventure. We bought the property in 2012, and then we cleared a little bit for the studio. We built a studio that we've been living and working in since 2014. And then we started the house in November 2020. And my husband and I, Zach, we did all of the work ourselves with the help of mostly with the help of my dad. But we did all of the millwork ourselves and all the woodwork. So the floor, the ceiling, the siding, the trim, all of the wood came from the land and we milled it ourselves. So it's been this kind of epic, overwhelming project. And I'm really glad that we're like moving in. It feels really good. So I'm in the process of clearing out the studio and getting everything just actually, we're getting rid of just a bunch of stuff because we've been living in there and it's become this just overwhelming space. So I'm getting a fresh start in the studio, get my big kid studio on. As soon as we're moved out of there, we get a bunch more space. So it's pretty exciting.
Okay, gosh, we dive into that, but just to look behind you, you've got three giant picture windows.
Yeah. This is the views down kind of into a gully. This is the living room. It's a small space. It's about 1,000 square feet, and um, it feels really grand though, actually. It
I
feels really good. It's been a long time coming. So we're
It,
feeling really lucky and having all our gratitude out there, just being like, oh, thankfully it all kind of came together. So feeling really
yeah,
lucky.
it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. And you work with glass, so do you have a lot of your glass around or your other friends? And
I hope to. We don't quite yet since we're just still in like the middle of the process of moving. We've been really selective on what we want to bring in the house just because it's been like so much stuff in the studio. We want like a really minimal space, but our front door actually, Dick Weiss made the front door for us. So we're very excited about that. Yeah.
legendary artist, for those of you who don't quite
Yeah.
know him yet, but we'll talk about him later, I'm sure, because he's so influential on so many artists. I'm sure he was like, April, you can make your own windows.
Yeah, he said he wanted to take the year to make art for friends. And so I think he's made a few pieces for people, but we were just so Dick is actually one of the artists that like I looked up to when I very first started working with glass. So to now be able to call him a friend and now to be able to live with one of his pieces, it feels like incredible. Yeah, the door is really beautiful. I'll have to send you a picture of it.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah, Dick is such a neat fellow and salt to the earth, as well as so creative and inspiring others to be creative.
Yeah, yeah, he's
Yeah.
just a really great person to be around and always just so supportive and always there for other people, seems like.
Yeah, huge installations too, just at Seattle International Airport, that giant, real, gosh, like lapis and cobalt blues.
Yeah, yeah.
I love it. I love it. Speaking of things I love, I love your work.
Thank you.
Even back in the day when you were a Pilchuck emerging artist in residence, I
Yeah, I think
was
that's when we
so
first met.
stoked. Yep, I was so stoked. I was working at Freezing Gallery and we were hosting the Ear show, and I was so stoked. I
Yeah.
was I could just see something so special in your work, and so did everybody else. And as I've seen your career grow and seen you grow as a person, you are just so courageous and gutsy and serve as an inspiration for me too. And I know for so many others, because
Thank
when I'm at
you.
your shows and we get to talk about your work, it's just like, wow, look what she's doing now.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So I do have a couple of questions. So if you see me looking over, um, there's a quote, and I just want to get your quote right. You said you were in the womb of the planet where life was literally boiling up from the ocean. And I read that and I had to know more of the story behind when you said that, why you said that, like what residency were you doing when you said that?
Yeah. So it was, I guess you can call it a residency. It was kind of a self-made thing that I did. Um, in 2013, I went to Antarctica and I met some wildlife biologists, and they connected me with some folks from the Hawaiian monk seal research program, which is a NOAA research program in Hawaii. And they work with the Hawaiian monk seal, which is endangered and endemic to the Hawaiian island archipelago, which includes the main Hawaiian islands and then the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, which is the archipelago that kind of extends beyond the main Hawaiian Islands. And I had just the incredible privilege of, I guess, meeting the right people at the right place at the right time. I had met these folks in Antarctica and had kept in touch with them. And a few years later, I was in touch with one of the biologists and they said, hey, do you want to spend the summer in Hawaii? And I thought, maybe I do. Yeah. And so I wrote up a proposal and I sent a proposal to the lead biologist and said, I would go and work as a volunteer field biologist, but I would be there and also take pictures for my work and use this time to be inspired to make artwork back at home when I'm at my studio. So I was actually there. I did actually do a lot of drawing and a lot of photography, but I was there working as a volunteer field biologist. So what I ended up doing was I was working from an island called Pearl and Hermes Atoll. It's about 1,200 miles from Honolulu. And I forget the exact dimensions of it now, but it's like 35 square kilometers of land, but it's in a 450 square mile atoll, which is all like basically water. And so I was there for about 4 months well, I worked with the program for about 6 months, but I was on the atoll for about 4 months with two other women. And so we were two women in the middle, or three women in the middle of the ocean, basically for 4 months. And there's no resupply. So everything that we needed, we had to bring with us. And there was also, if emergency did happen, we had satellite phones, but we would need to, it would be about a 10-day rescue. So we were far.
We're far.
we were in the middle of nowhere. And that quote, so getting back to your question, that was kind of the context for it. That quote kind of came from being at that atoll for such a period of time. And an atoll is like the top of a volcano that's kind of sunk to the bottom of the ocean, right?
Okay.
It's the very rim of this volcano, and but at the, in the ocean. And like I had said, I'd been in Antarctica before. And when I was in Antarctica, I felt like I had this moment where I felt like, wow, I'm on a planet. Like there was this moment that I don't think I've felt before or since, where I had this like really physical feeling of like, I'm on the planet in the middle of the universe. And there's something very planetary about being in Antarctica. But being at Pearl and Hermes in the middle of the ocean and being so isolated for like such a long time, and seeing, like, when you first arrived there, it looked so barren. It just looked like there was nothing there. And after you spend so much time there, you just see all the different variety of fish and the seabirds and the marine mammals and the sea turtles. And it just felt like there was so much life. And it almost felt like the life was literally boiling up from the ocean. And it just felt like, if a place like Antarctica is like the planet is the body, then I feel like something like Pearl and Hermes, like an atoll, would be the womb of that body. And so that's kind of where that quote came from.
That is so neat. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, it just sounds like all of these ecosystems that you've been a part of, and then as you're able to live through those experiences and give them some more grounding and some more context for you. That is what an experience you've had to go from such different polar opposites of our planet.
Yeah, it was incredible. It was gosh, it was absolutely a life-changing experience for sure. Both of them, but especially being out at Pearl and Hermes, being so remote on such a place that like humans really, like we really aren't made to be living on these tiny islands, watery atolls, right? So to be a part of an ecosystem that really you felt like a guest, like you felt like a visitor in this place, and being very mindful of where you were, and just the kind of things that go through your mind when you're in just such a remote place. It's just a really different type of feeling, and it gives you kind of a different understanding of where humans fit and where we maybe don't fit, and what we're doing to the planet. One major thing that just I struggled a lot with there was the marine debris that was washing up on shore. Here we are, a 10-day rescue from um, anything, and here it's just the islands were covered with garbage and marine debris. So it was it was very discouraging to kind of see that sort of like human impact. I mean, you hear about it and you see Google images of it, but no Google images can replace the actual experience of something. So that I think was probably the hardest part of being out there, not the no internet, not the fresh food, not the no showers, not the clean laundry, not even the bird ticks. It was just kind of like the garbage was shocking.
Oh my word. I can imagine. I can't imagine just because I have been in Hawaiian Islands to see some of the garbage coming
Yeah.
up. But to what I is hard for me to imagine is not having the other distractions like the internet to go to escape from what you're seeing.
Yeah. Yeah. Or
Wow.
to, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I've seen a few of your installations that you've made from these experiences, and with the debris one, is that where your color fields of lighter, like, is that where
Yeah.
that one came from?
Yeah. So when we were on the beaches, I mean, we would do these kind of cleanups when we were there, and we filled up, I think, eight. They're called bagsters. They're like 5 feet by 5 feet by maybe like 7 or 8 feet tall, and they're these huge, big, heavy duty bags that we threw marine debris in. And we filled about eight of those that we then took off island. But I mean, there it didn't even make a dent in anything. But when we would survey the islands for the monk seals, and as we did that, I noticed there was one thing I noticed about the marine debris is if you found one of something, you would find thousands of that same thing. So one thing I noticed was the Bic lighters. So I asked my field mates, if pick up the Bic lighters as you walk around, and let's just see how many we can get by the end of the field season. So we ended up picking up lighters, and we got a couple of buckets of these 5-gallon buckets full of lighters at the end of the season. And then when I came home, I ended up bringing them with me, and I think we collected about 1,000 of them or somewhere around there. But then I asked the biologist for the next field season if they would mind continuing collecting for me. So the Hawaiian Monk Seal Research Program instituted that into their protocols, and they had their biologists pick up lighters and send them to me for that installation. Yeah, so it's been a pretty great collaboration with those guys.
Wow.
Yeah,
Creative way.
that's where that
To
came
use
from.
the,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. And did you create other work in Cameo? We really didn't get right into your specific media
Yeah.
in glass, like using Cameo glass and doing high relief on these glass panels, because I was so struck by your tree sanctuary behind you, but really like diving into your career and what I feel is so very different about your creativity and your place in glass and the glass movement is you're taking this legacy of cameo glass and you have turned it upside down and quite frankly made it huge. You have large scale cameo glass panels where you're creating and using what is around you as a mirror to create your content, right? I mean, you've always done that, and later I'm looking forward to hearing how your mirror has changed because I have seen it change. But with this cameo glass, what were some of the pieces that you were making from what you came home and made from the glass from the Hawaiian research trip?
Yeah. So when I was there, I did a lot of pinhole photography. And so I did a lot of digital photography too. I worked off both of it. So I really tried to create kind of a sense of place and kind of show what Pearl and Hermes was like out of the cameo engraving. And so the cameo engraved glass I really view as kind of archival, permanent, tactile records, in a time when everything is stored virtually in the cloud. Here's like a tangible physical archival record. And so I really just tried to document the place and the experience as kind of like how I perceived it. So I used a lot of the imagery that I took as inspiration and turned those into the engravings. Um, so that's what I focused on for the
I
engravings,
I
just to
think
kind of.
a lot of people, novices and experienced collectors, will even say, things like painting hands is so hard for artists, and artists will say the same things, but it's the same thing with water. And here you
Yeah.
are being able to create this scene like the water is right here in me, and then I could just keep going. Or some of them are so moody, I feel like I'm in the middle of the float and bobbing up and down in the middle of the ocean with you.
Cool. Yeah, the water is hard. It takes a long time to engrave and can get pretty frustrating, but yeah, it's the water is difficult. It's been before went to Antarctica and then Pearl and Hermes, I was focusing a lot on kind of city-based work, which I've been thinking a lot about recently, and I feel like in a way it was a little bit easier because everything's more kind of geometric, and even though, with representing something as abstract as the ocean is, you can't really make a mistake, but in a way it's harder, or I find it difficult to really capture, but it's been really a challenge. Yeah.
Well, a challenge that you have taken head on, and I really feel it. Yeah, the just to go back on, at the beginning of your career, you were doing more of the cityscape, or like a position like, let's use the one, I forget the title, forgive me, but it was more of a train station setting. And the
Mm-hmm.
light was coming through the windows towards the viewer. And the way you were able to use the cameo glass to show the light and the shadowing on the ground, it was so haunting. And how talk us through some of your process at the beginning of your career, how you were using light to really in your composition. What was that like?
Yeah, so using light in the composition, I think that pretty much is why I do engrave. I actually, yeah, I started off as a glass blower and then I went to printmaking. Um, but I really enjoyed the cameo process because I felt like you could really bring in light to a piece. So I mean, glass, like unlike other materials, really holds light. It can reflect light, it can refract light. And I feel with the cameo engravings, really, you're, because it is a relief carving, it can hold the light and create shadows on itself, but it can also kind of bring that to the wall or to the space and things like that. So yeah, light's been really important part of why I've decided, why I choose to represent the imagery in cameo glass. And I think, I'm just kind of always thinking about light as I'm engraving and how the light will play off of the piece. And I think that holds true for my early works, all, through to work now for sure.
Absolutely. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, every time I look back, I'm like, wait, what was that? The painting in our absence.
Oh, yep.
In our absence. Oh, oh. Can we talk about that one? It's
Sure.
almost like that was almost even like a bridge between earlier work to the work with more the natural world settings. And it looks like there's a human figure in there, but it's disappearing, or maybe it is just appearing. So, can you walk
It
us through that one?
Yeah, actually, that the imagery for that piece was on our land, and it was a pinhole camera image that I took. It was before we cleared, but kind of when as we cleared, and Yeah, there is a figure. It could both be appearing or disappearing. And what's funny, I got some feedback on that piece that not a lot of people saw the figure in that work, which surprised me because for me it was like this very like I could see it there. But I guess dealing, that's where the image came from. But I guess conceptually, I think a lot about human impact on the environment and thinking about the fingerprints that we leave all over the place, all over the planet, and thinking about, um, either, that could be a person just arriving and making this impact, or a person just leaving and then, kind of letting nature um, take its course. So that was where that piece came from.
You have a beautiful relationship with your environment. I just, and the way that you share it with us is so soft, but yet makes a huge impact.
It's good to hear that, sometimes when I'm working in my studio and I'm here by myself, I spend a lot of time by myself. So when I hear that, it makes an impact, it feels reassuring to hear that, even though I'm here in the woods mostly by myself, that the work gets out there and the message gets heard.
Oh, yes. It's, and I hope to introduce more collectors to your work, and especially through um, everything else that I get to do to share your work, because it is so great. So, can we dive into your creative process a little bit? You've touched on, you've used pinhole photography. So you're mirroring your environment, your ecosystems, and your relationship within and around. Sometimes you use pinhole photography because you're creating like a reference image, right? That then you can use for your composition.
Exactly. Yep. So I start off with I usually start if I'm going out into my environment or wherever I'm gonna be, whether it's on a residency or just when I lived in Seattle, it would be just walking around the city. So I start off by taking the reference image and then I come back to the studio. I spend a lot of time looking through photos. I also spend a lot of time writing, which is a huge part of my process that I've been thinking a lot about, I've never really shared much or well, I share a little bit through like the catalogs that, the galleries will produce and stuff. But other than that, I don't share a lot of my writing. And I think maybe one day I would like to do that. But I do draw a lot, I write a lot, and then kind of I take those ideas from the drawings and the writings and looking through photographs. And then I kind of choose the imagery that I want to use. And then from there, I start the glass process. So there's quite a bit of time before I actually even start the glass process. And it's also um, glass is and especially cameo engraving is just such a timely or time consuming process that I really do try to make I try to get the composition of what I'm working on pretty well figured out before. This is my cat's tail. I
Hello.
try to get that. I try to get it figured out before I work on the glass. So usually I have a pretty good idea of like what I want to do before I work on glass. Um, she's not gonna go away,
Oh,
so you're
she
gonna
is
hear
welcome.
a
Oh,
weird
yeah.
cat tail
Hello.
sticking out with nothing else. Um, So I use bullseye glass, and bullseye is it's a phenomenal material. It's a handmade sheet glass that's made down in Portland by it's just amazing glass. They have like every color of the rainbow and then some, and it all is compatible with each other. So you don't have to worry about compatibility issues, which is a very big reason why I use their glass, aside from it being beautiful. It is really hard, which is not ideal for engraving because it means it takes a lot longer and it's a lot harder to cut through.
Mm.
But I think it's worth it. So I use I get these sheets of colored glass, and I've already come up with my composition and the size of the panels that I want to engrave. And then I usually start off with a sheet of white glass and then some 2 sheets of colored glass underneath that. And then I carve through the white layer to reveal the underlying colors. And I do that on a machine called an engraving lathe or a cutting lathe. And actually they're basically the same machine, except one is smaller and one is bigger. Um, so I'll remove a lot of material quickly with the cutting lathe, and I'll do a lot of the detail work with the engraving lathe. And a glass lathe is not quite like a wood turner's lathe, but it's more like a metalsmith's grinder. So you've got a wheel that's turning, and then you bring the glass up to the wheel and then remove material that way. So it's a lot like drawing, but taking the paper to the pencil, if that makes sense. Sort of does.
It
Sometimes I'll
does,
use
yeah.
a Fordham on these bigger panels. I've been recently making bigger panels that I can't lift up to the wheel. So I'll use it like a Fordham tool or a die grinder type tool. But I much prefer actually the marks that are made through the engraving wheels. So um, there's some trade-offs there. Yeah.
So neat. So neat. So if like back when you were a resident at Pilchuck, were you I just kind of want to show your growth,
Okay.
and were you using like one sheet of glass for that time in your career and now you're sandwiching, or were you
No, I've pretty much always used 3 sheets of glass. Sometimes for the bigger panels, I'm using 5 actually to make them
oh,
bigger panels. I'm still only really cutting through the top layer though. It's just to kind of make it so it's not a really thin, large sheet. Um, at the very beginning of my career working this way, I was so fortunate and had a residency at the Bullseye Factory, and I got to do some color tests that were I got to take every transparent color and fuse it with every other transparent color. So I've got like hundreds of these color tests. So I've used kind of the same setup for my engravings. Not the same colors, but the same setups the whole time. But I have kind of changed the scale and the my approach to the engraving and the I guess the content of the engravings as well. But that's kind of one thing that's stayed steady. Although I do experiment with a lot of color, I don't tend to. I haven't shown that yet. I may, and maybe I will soon. I don't know. We'll see what happens when I have my new
maybe.
studio.
Okay.
I'm
I'd
very
love to sign up
excited
to see
about.
it.
Yeah, I'm very excited about how not living and working in the same space will transform my life. And also the studio is just going to be much, much bigger once we move out of there and get all of our stuff out of there.
Yeah. Well, shoot. Well, wait a minute, because there's one other thing I noticed in your last exhibition. You were even going in and hand painting and doing some handwork on
Yeah,
the work.
yeah. So I've been excited about that's also new. I've always been interested. I draw a lot and I paint like watercolor paint a lot. And one thing that I find difficult about engraving is being able to be very expressive with the material because it's such a long process and you're very slowly removing layers of glass. You can't really make like a quick expressive mark. And maybe you can, and it's something, it'll be a lifetime of figuring out how to do that. That's kind of my goal, but I kind of, it seems like things have to always be overworked. And so getting the pieces out of the kiln and just being able to do some expressive brush work and then add like a little bit of color feels, yeah, it just feels more true, I guess, to kind of where the piece started, where, I'm starting off by drawing and writing and doing things like that. So it feels like a nice transition and not so kind of tight. It feels a little more free and expressive. So I'm excited about exploring that.
Me too. Me
Yeah.
too. I think
So I
that
was, oh, okay.
the handwork just adds a whole nother, a human made it. It is she
Yeah.
made, really. And I'm just like, it's,
Yeah, I'm glad you like it. I was kind of nervous to put it out there. Some of the surfaces are very fragile. It's like watercolor or oil pastel. And then some of the pieces I did acrylic, which isn't quite as acrylic paint, so it's not quite as delicate. But there's something that I really like about especially the piece that I did the oil pastel and watercolor work on. Um, there's something very permanent and archival about the glass, and then you have something very temporary added to the surface of it. And it feels kind of more true and in line of like what's happening in the greater world right now as everything's changing. And making something that's so permanent and archival feels almost antithetical to what I'm actually making. So having those, the oil pastel on there that could smear, or the
mm,
watercolor that could wipe off, well, it's, the evolution of the piece. And um yeah, my feelings definitely wouldn't be hurt if the piece got smeared and that was it, and that the life of the piece kind of um just evolved, I guess. I don't know how collectors would feel about that, but I like the idea of the evolution of a piece, the
yeah,
life.
because all of a sudden, I don't know if you saw it on my face, but I was like, oh, how would you ship that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was carefully shipped, so it wouldn't, hopefully the smudges would not happen in shipping, but um yeah.
Well, I mean, the world is a messy place sometimes. So
Yeah. Yeah.
have you found have you found like you've had some struggles being an artist that talks about their environment and talks about climate focused issues?
Um, yeah, a little bit. I mean, I've given lectures about, I gave a lecture, I remember giving a lecture after going to Antarctica and talking about climate change, and somebody saying, oh, well, that doesn't impact me, or something to that effect, and being like, oh, well, you'd be surprised, or like meeting people that just say, oh, I'm not interested in that, or, but I think no matter kind of what topic you talk about, you're going to run up against that. And I think that's also okay, because, um, and maybe it's good. And, maybe that person will remember something from the lecture and then remember, oh yeah, now this is affecting me. Or, I think that I think as an artist, I'm in a unique position to, um, talk about things that like you might not be able to openly talk about. And I think it's good. I think it's I always think it's a good thing when people feel challenged by the work. I wish that I challenged people more with my work, actually.
Really?
And I think, yeah, I mean, I don't think I've been too controversial or anything like that, but I could see that. Yeah, I don't know, but yeah,
I think
I've thought about that
maybe
a
in
lot.
the yeah, maybe in the glass world, if you just look at the studio glass movement, maybe you're more controversial than you think, because I think you are one of the new generation of artists that entered the studio glass movement and was sharing their skill sets and sharing their creativity, um, but with a specific message. You know, you were saying very much like, I am a mirror of my environment and this is what's happening, and the human interaction, we need to talk about it.
Yeah. I guess it's hard to know. It's interesting. It's interesting to hear you say that from your perspective, when you're, like I said, I feel like I'm really in a bubble. And I live in Port Townsend. It's not that far from Seattle, but I never get into the city. And so I do feel maybe a little isolated, and um, maybe I don't know the impact that I'm having for
Yeah.
sure.
Oh, yeah. You serve as a huge inspiration.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I know you work with a few galleries, but just because you do work with climate focused content, and I just was wondering more about how you feel about working with galleries. Are you getting some gallery love? Do you
Yeah, I've always had I've worked with just a few galleries. I've never made I'm not like a high producing artist, it takes a long time to make my work, and so I've only worked with a few galleries. I feel like I've always really lucked out and have had some pretty positive relationships. I think the biggest thing that I struggle with is um maybe it's time management, maybe it's a personal thing where just trying to have shows and produce a body of work that takes so long to make, it's been a challenge. So I just had a show in April, and I feel like for my next show I want to actually have most of the work made or some of the work made before I like commit again, because I find that it gets stressful. And there are things that I don't particularly like about being a professional artist. And so I feel like I'm at this point in my life where I guess I'm experiencing a lot of big changes personally and professionally. And I am starting to think about reimagining what my career looks like so it's less stressful, and where I feel like I can make more meaningful work, I guess. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I don't
Oh,
know where what that means exactly at this moment, but I feel like I'm ready to embrace my intuition. And I feel like my intuition never leads me wrong. And when I don't listen to it, I'm usually sent the wrong way. So I feel like, okay, I'm gonna like listen to my intuition and follow my heart on this one. So we'll
oh,
see.
yes, please follow that heart
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
yours. Yes. Oh, that sounds amazing. I actually have chills like all
Yeah.
over as you
Oh,
were like,
cool.
nope, follow the path.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like I've maybe stepped off of my path recently, or maybe not recently, but slowly kind of diverging. And I feel like, oh, I need to like reassess here and see what's going on. Because there's not just one way of doing
Right.
things. And I don't know. Um, I've definitely had a little bit of, I think in one of your questions you had asked about museum love, and I've had a little bit of museum love. This last year I had a commission by Iowa State University, and that was one of the highlights of my career. They were just such a lovely team of women to work with, and it felt very supportive, and probably, yeah, definitely the best commission experience that I've had. So that was amazing. But yeah, I don't know if sometimes I feel like there's a lot of interest in the work, and sometimes I feel like there's not. It's kind of like an ebb and
That
flow.
the
And
ebb and flow, right? Where you have to stay your course between. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the art thing. And I feel like now I have enough years under my belt that I cannot like freak out about it. I think when I was younger, I would get really anxious about like, oh no, what if I don't sell a piece, and how am I going to pay the bills, and how am I going to do this? And that was a big part of leaving the city, was just that it was so expensive. And we bought this land and we built the studio, and like, now we're living in this, it feels like crazy that we have this amazing house and studio, but really we cut our costs by like 2/3 leaving the city to move out here. And like we were able to save money to be able to do this. And now I feel like I am removed from a lot of things, but I'm also not like sweating every month of like, how am I going to pay my rent or my bills? And so that is, moving out here has given me like a little bit of financial freedom. that I didn't have before, for sure. And that helps with the ebbs and the flows of like, what am I gonna do? Okay, it's okay. I can like get through this or figure it out. And yeah, just a lot of like having faith in yourself or,
Yeah.
yeah.
And more room now that the anxiousness has been removed, more room for the joy to come in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hope.
Yes.
Hopefully.
Oh, yes. Well, I'm sure those trees are giving you lots of love because they look
Oh,
amazing.
yeah, you'll have to come up. You're not too far away.
I would love to. I would
Yeah.
love to. I have just loved every second of being able to talk to you and share more of your creative process and everything that you have going on right now in your career. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. It's been a great talking with you and seeing your smiling face. Yeah. Thank you.